Hello, everybody. Welcome. Let's do this. How you doing? Please hit subscribe and share and all those things we'll get into. There's actually more televised. I'm going to show you the video admissions by politicians in the Israeli parliament, by IDF spokespeople, by the Israeli media, various people in the Israeli media admitting that many of the most ridiculous stories, the most obscene stories, the most horrific stories you heard out of October 7th did not happen. And I keep bringing you these admissions or these revelations as they come about, but they do keep growing. And so I'm going to be bringing you those. I'm also going to bring you the truth about Alexei Navalny. Now, you'll see. I have an interesting analysis about it, but I don't actually, it's not like I have inside knowledge as to how Navalny died, but I'll be getting into that. I'll be getting into the continued fight against this genocide, but so much more. We're going to talk about how much terrorism has increased in Africa since the U.S. pretended that we're fighting terrorism in Africa. All of that's coming, as well as much more. Please hit the thumbs up button, the like button. I'll try to address any super chats that come through. I might not get to them right away, but I will hopefully get to them. And yeah, let's get into it. I'm feeling pretty good today because the cashier at the Walgreens or whatever the hell pharmacy. There's only 4 you're allowed to be at across the country. So whatever pharmacy I was at, she said that I looked like Leonardo DiCaprio, which I know is absolutely not true. But I was like, yes, I do. Absolutely. And I actually went like this. She said, you look like, what's his name, DiCaprio? And I said, Leonardo. And she said, no, Ralph. He's like an overweight dude that works on the cooking channel, I think, does something on the cook. So it went like that. Anyway, thank you, folks, for being here. Please click thumbs up. Let's get straight to it. So Max Blumenthal posted this clip, journalist with Gray Zone. And, I'm also going to hopefully get to Chris Hedges as well. But this is a pretty incredible clip of Israeli television with various high-ranking people. You'll see the names on the screen, and I'm going to play most of this clip. But you'll see the names on the screen as they come along. But various people in Israeli government, Israeli media, talking about how the most crazy stories from October 7th, right? The babies hanging from trees and put into ovens and just all this nutty. And if it were real, it wouldn't be nutty, right? It would be goddamn horrific. But it's all been debunked or is being debunked. And now you have even the people who fully support this genocide, the people cheering, high-fiving for genocide. You have even them talking about, well, yeah, so it turns out that stuff's not true. Anyway, let's get into this clip. Oh, yeah. Should have said. This is in Hebrew, so because some of you listen to the podcast and don't watch this, I will quietly play the Hebrew, but I'll basically be trying to read it as we go along. Good evening to you, he says. We'll be talking about the new hostage deal online. Will it be able to end the negotiations deadlock? But before that, watch the following footage of the Kafir Brigade commanders, so IDF. And so this is now an IDF commander talking about arriving at Kibbutz Be'eri, which is one of the kibbutzes that was attacked on October 7th. He says, we arrive in Kibbutz Be'eri, and there's an account. There I encounter two main images of the battle. Apropos of the enemies, one is a nursery school with innocent children. They were butchered, killed. You see the children inside the house. 8 babies died. And another image that caught my attention when I saw Jenya, may she rest in peace, an elderly woman from Kibbutz Be'eri, and I saw the number engraved on her arm. He's talking, of course, about the Holocaust number, the numbers that the survivors of the Holocaust had tattooed on them by the Nazis. And you say she went through the Holocaust, Auschwitz, and in the end, she died at Kibbutz Be'eri. That's not something that you can't even understand. Okay, so horrific stuff, right? Horrific stuff. And now we cut back to again, this is Israeli television. So this is basically Israeli propaganda, but even they are coming to the admissions of what actually happened on October 7th. Anyway, here's back to the news anchor. He says, well, no 8 babies were killed in Be'eri, according to the kibbutz spokesperson. And there's no woman named Jenya in Be'eri. He then, and various people have reported this, that the babies so-called killed all throughout October 7th. There was apparently one baby that was killed on October 7th. Still terrible, but nothing like these stories that we were told, these crazy propaganda stories. And that baby that was killed was not hung from a laundry line or put in an oven or all these bizarre stuff. That baby was killed in the crossfire between the IDF and Hamas. The news anchor goes to another clip. This is an IDF soldier saying there were also children here, babies who were hanged on a laundry line, really, in one line. It was very hard to see. When I saw it, it shocked me. You don't really understand what you're seeing in front of your eyes. Is it a picture or is it really reality? It's very hard to understand. Then back to the news anchor. He says, Baskila is talking about the supposed event at Kfar Aza. But in Kfar Aza, they made it clear long ago that this event simply didn't happen. By the way, he said the things. He was told that it didn't happen in a tour of foreign news journalists who came here. And pay attention to what the police spokesperson to the foreign media not long ago. So this is a police spokesperson. Clearly spent a good long time in America, because very American accent. But he says a pregnant woman was cut open.
Cut open. Guys, the things that happen are so sick. This is not a Netflix show, and it's not a cable news show. None of that. No, this is real life.
So he said that a woman was cut open and the baby was cut from her stomach. Back to the news anchor says this also didn't happen. So many terrible, cruel things happened. Some of the most cruel things that can be done to a human being on October 7th. Mickey Rosenthal. So this is a politician, Israeli politician who's been in parliament, and he's being asked by the anchor, why were things that didn't happen said? So the question is, and I addressed this the other day, that plenty of shit went down on October 7th, right? Yes, Hamas did run through these kibbutzes and at least try to grab a lot of people as hostages. So and then plenty of people died. Hundreds died in either crossfire or, in some cases, IDF tank shelling of the buildings. But still, all of this is a horror show. I mean, if I were there, I would be traumatized for life, as you can imagine. But instead, you have these ridiculous made-up stories of babies hanging from laundry lines and stuff like that. So it's like, why not stick to the truth is the question being asked of this Israeli politician. Mickey Rosenthal. He says, I assume that in order to increase the magnitude, the hatred for Hamas, as if it's necessary to say, as if what happened wasn't enough. And what are people inventing? Serious people are inventing these events. The answer is that maybe they heard it as a rumor. And maybe that's the most important thing to say in this context. The war is not only military and not only political, it's mainly media. So this is, again, someone siding with the genocide. This is an Israeli politician. This is Israeli media outlets siding with the genocide, who even they are admitting that what we've been told about October 7th and has been repeated on so many American and Western mainstream media outlets and has been repeated by Joe Biden, even though the White House quietly had to walk back his bullshit later. It's been repeated by so many people. Bill Maher was touting it the other day. I broke down that video where Bill Maher claimed there was video of Hamas beheading babies. Why do they have to lie? And here he is, an Israeli politician, saying, well, because we needed to increase the hatred of Hamas, we needed to, and he then says, perhaps the most important thing of this They would call it a battle or a conflict or whatever they want to call it, but genocide. Perhaps the most important thing of this genocide is the media. We have to get the media to make this sound as horrific as possible. And the implied part here, which is not said by these people on this Israeli television show, the implied part is that if you just heard the truth about what Hamas did, it wouldn't be enough to justify genocide. That's implied, right? Because otherwise, why do it? So if you're going to commit genocide, it can't just be that Hamas broke out of their prison, because that's what it is. Gaza is a prison, broke out of their prison and took hostages. That's not enough to justify genocide. That's not enough to bomb hospitals. That's not enough to bomb schools. That's not enough to bomb bakeries. That's not enough to just keep murdering an endless stream of children. Over 11,000 children now, 28,000 people dead. And that doesn't even count those who are missing under the rubble. Like, it doesn't, people around the world, and most don't, but still, the ones who do support this would not support this if they just knew the reality of October 7th. That's implied here, because he's saying, well, the media is very important, and so some of these people made up these stories in order to rally for the cause. He says media is the most important part, also to our prime minister. Then someone else says, it's necessary to say, Sari, that even the United Hatzalah spread in the past the fictional story about a baby being put in an oven. And then she corrects him and says it wasn't United Hatzalah, it was Zakah, but yes. I also heard the testimony from one of the officers there. I think that sometimes the imagination gets mixed up with the facts, and this is not imagination getting mixed up with the facts, because when you have something in imagination, this is on the day of, right? It's generally details. It's generally like for example, I was as I mentioned the other day. I was a few feet from the car that killed Heather Heyer in Charlottesville. And I was traumatized by that. I had some PTSD type feelings afterwards. And if you had asked me, was it one guy in the car or two? Was the guy black or white or Asian? I wouldn't have known. Or if I pretended to know, I would have gotten it wrong. Like those type of details. It's not, I walked in and saw a bunch of babies hanging from laundry lines. That is not like, that is an actively created story to perpetrate and facilitate genocide. It is very different. And also the fact that this was repeated over and over again. This also indicts the fact that all of this is being debunked, and the mass rape story. We've talked about that, the debunking of that. The New York Times, I played the clip the other day of the New York Times reporter who made up those stories. He said publicly in front of a group audience, he said, well, I didn't have any evidence, and it's not my job as a reporter to have evidence. I'm just relaying things. Basically, there's no evidence. I'm just saying things. And so this also indicts our mainstream media, of course, Israeli media, but our mainstream media in the US and the UK, in that they were willing to repeat all of these stories. Thank you, Kareem, for the donation. They were willing to repeat all of these stories just to further the cause, further the genocide. I mean, and without checking into any of it. Joe Biden said on stage in front of the nation that he'd seen video of beheaded babies. You know how insane that is for the president of the United States? I mean, granted, he's got the mental capacity of a woodchuck who just ate a bunch of mercury, but still, it's still weird for the president of the United States to get on stage and say he saw video of beheaded babies that never existed. Bizarre. All right, we got like 1 minute left, but all of this is to me, this is actually surprising. I know, I kind of lack the ability to be shocked about much of anything anymore, but it's very surprising to see Israeli propaganda outlets, Israeli politicians, they even have a quote from the spokesman of the IDF here in a minute that I'll talk about. It's shocking to see even them admitting that these are all made up stories and asking, why did we make up all these stories? Thank you, Zozodo, for the donation. Really appreciate it. That's awesome. You guys make this show possible. I know I say that a lot, but you'll notice I don't have the. I'm not telling you to go buy some penis enlargers right now. So that doesn't fund the show. It's you guys that fund the show. Okay, well, let's continue here. I forget who this guy is. I don't know. I don't know if it's. I don't think it says who he is on the screen for him. He says accurate story, super, super important, precisely because to oppose all the deniers, to oppose all, and then someone else cuts in and says that's their bread and butter. And here's the thing. I'm not a denier. I'm not a denier that October 7th happened. I just want the truth. Isn't that crazy? And here's another thing that not enough people mention. Thank you, Sailor Jerry, for the donation. You rock. Here's something else that is not said enough, is even if every single ridiculous, holy crap, propaganda story that came out of October 7th, even if everyone were true, still can't commit genocide, still can't bomb hospitals, still can't bomb schools, still can't target journalists and kill more journalists than the entire Vietnam War in 4 months. You still can't do any of that. So I always like to make that point. I feel like that point needs to be the banner headline of, even if this were true, you still can't do what Israel's doing right now, bombing refugee camps, bombing an open air prison in Gaza, dropping more bombs than the United States dropped in many years on Afghanistan. Anyway, back to this. My point is, I am not a denier of anything. I just want truth. Just give me truth and I'm there, you know? And then someone else says, then they say, oh, we don't believe the stories of rape or the stories of sexual abuse. And it's like, I am more than willing to believe whatever stories have evidence. More than willing. But for the ones that don't, for the ones where they're like, we're just going to tell you this thing, then no, I'm sorry. You have proven you're a liar over and over and over again. That you can, in that sentence, you is the Israeli government, it's the Israeli media, it's the U.S. media, U.S. government, all of that. You've proven you're willing to lie about all this. So bring evidence or shut the F up. Keep it clean for the kids. Bring the receipts, man. Bring the goddamn receipts. Thank you, 906. Your name is hard to say, but I appreciate the donation. You guys make this show possible. You really do keep it going. So to the tens of thousands of you watching around the world, a tiny percentage of you. Now, I love all you. You're all amazing. I love you. If you want to make out after the show, we can do it. But I love all you. But out of the tens of thousands of you that watch the show, a tiny percentage keep it going. So I can't thank you enough. All right, let's keep going. But he says, because these things didn't happen. So he's talking about the stories of that was an interesting overtalk that I'm not sure most people catch when they see this clip. One of them goes, yeah, the deniers start to say that the systemic rape and the sexual abuse didn't they stopped believing it. And then the anchor jumps in and goes, well, it's because they didn't happen. So the anchor, I don't know who he is, but he's based on this. And then the other guy says, precisely, that's why it's so important to make sure to perform an accurate documentation of the atrocities that were made, which is the opposite of what Israel has been doing every step of the way, because they don't want it to continue to come out that the IDF killed, if not half, many, maybe well more than half of the people that died October 7th were due to the IDF. I mean, the biggest loss of life on October 7th was the Nova Music Festival, where 300, whatever, maybe close to 400 were killed. And you have tons of testimony saying that IDF helicopters arrived and started firing on everyone, that escaped, the exits were blocked, that people who survived were amazed to see that Israeli border patrol were firing at them, music festival goers. So this guy's saying, yeah, we need a documentation. It's like Israel doesn't want a documentation, a real investigation as to what happened. Israel said, and I think I was one of the few to cover this, that Israel, they said they were going to shred and bury all the cars from that have been blown up and shot up October 7th. Like, and we're talking a lot of cars because of the whole music festival and everything. They were going to shred. I don't even know how you shred a car. Do you know the level you've got to want to cover up evidence to shred a car and bury it in the desert? Like, that is top level cover up of evidence. That is because they can't, there's no shredders that big, right? There's no like giant, you just push a car in shredding machines like at an office. Like, just take that out to the car shredder. No, you gotta, that takes some work, man. Anyway. He says, bring an accurate report. And people, I believe, I agree with Sarah. Sorry, well, everything gets mixed up to some people, and that's why I give them the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, but this was not mixed up. This was making up truly ridiculous stories. I mean, how do you say you saw a specific Holocaust survivor die at a kibbutz with a name, and all of that was just imagination? You made up the name and the existence of a Holocaust survivor when you went into this kibbutz? That's not like fog of war stuff. You don't accidentally, I couldn't see. I thought that there was a Holocaust survivor with this specific name at this kibbutz. Like, that's not fog of war. That's just you decided to make stuff up. Because they didn't just decide one morning to make up a story. I guess that they went through some process, very careful about it. Anyone who deals, man, this guy's talking fast. Anyway, but here's what I wanted to get to. Here's a comment. He says, here's a comment from the IDF spokesman. So this is the person who's reporting the official stance of the IDF. The events, so this is a quote, the events are being investigated and checked. Don't worry, folks. The IDF is looking into how the IDF did on October 7th. I know you're all reassured by that. We know that we're going to get a great report from the IDF on how the IDF did. Thank you, Shu906. You're the best. Love you again. The event, so here's the IDF spokesperson. The events are being investigated and checked, and the accepted practices were made clear. By the way, I think the accepted practices means Hannibal Directive, which is, most of you already know, if a hostage is taken, Israel has a directive where they kill the hostage, they kill the hostage takers, and they kill anyone around. That is like standard practice. And they were operating under it on October 7th. To continue from the IDF quote, accepted practices were made clear. In any case, there was no intention to describe a reality that didn't happen. So, well, I'll just finish it. We apologize, and if anyone was, because of these things, will be made clear for all commanders who are taking part in the media effort. Okay, so to me, one of the key sentences, we had no intention to describe a reality that didn't happen. But what's that imply? It implies you may not have had an intention, but it implies you did describe a reality that didn't happen. So here is the IDF apologizing for describing a reality that didn't happen. You might not have had intention to, but you did. And again, so much of this has leaked out in drips and drabs since October 7th. Obviously, it is barely covered by the mainstream media, although some important aspects of it have been kind of covered by the New York Times, or you'll find a little stray sentence here or there in the New York Times. But this is Connie's asking about Navalny. I'll be talking about Navalny in a few minutes. But this is a major story, especially for a country committing genocide right now. This should be everywhere. And of course, it is not, because that is the way that our system works. That is the way that the U.S. empire works when it is allied with someone as closely as Israel. It endorses this. It facilitates this. The U.S. is funding this. The U.S. is part of this. The U.S. military is piloting drones, according to the New York Times, above Gaza, giving information to Israel so they can commit genocide. The Pentagon has wrote a memo telling the U.S. troops to be on standby to help Israel in the case of a ground invasion. The CIA, according to the New York Times, is helping Israel assassinate Palestinians. So this is a U.S. operation in many ways. Okay, let's jump to another amazing. By the way, everyone, click thumbs up, click share. Amazing clip from the State Department. And please, anyone who can, throw in a super chat. I'll be responding to them, most of them, whether it's on Rumble or youtube.com/moment of clarity. Okay, so this is I always do that. This is the State Department spokesperson, but they're asking him about. So I've talked a bunch on this live stream about UNRWA. UNRWA is UNRWA, that is the massive UN aid agency that helps so many Palestinians. 30,000 employees, 1.5 or $1.2 billion a year, 700 schools. They are pivotal to helping Palestinians survive, and Israel's doing everything it can to crush that aid agency. It's very important to Israel to destroy it. To go back to the false stories from a donation, thanks to Husnain. Both stories about the pregnant woman and the baby in the oven are stories from the first Nakba, which is back in the 1940s, the first Nakba in the 40s and 50s. Also, Bernie got roasted here in Ireland the other day. I'm not sure what happened to Bernie in Ireland the other day, but he's saying, thank you, Husnain, for the donation. He's saying that these are repeated stories. It's basically stories that Israelis grow up hearing about in the first Nakba. Oh, babies were put in ovens and things. And they're just reciting them. They're basically reciting old propaganda, I guess. But anyway, so here's the State Department talking about how the U.S. has quickly moved to defund UNRWA because Israel claims that 12 of the 30,000 employees were involved in October 7th, even though they give no evidence. And the U.S. jumped to defund UNRWA. And he's being asked about that compared to other stances the U.S. takes. And it's a pretty funny clip.
As you've said repeatedly, the U.S. chose to be cautious as it suspended funding to UNRWA for allegations that 12 of its 30,000 person staff, may have been involved in the atrocities on October 7th. And as you described yesterday, that's kind of standard U.S. policy to have this type of caution with all sorts of entities. But, as our colleagues have asked you over the past few months, there have been broad and specific human rights violations that we've been concerned about, human attacks against hospitals.
We don't need to rehash all of the human rights violations. I think you guys know how many human rights violations Israel has right now.
And leaving her to die horribly. And so I'm wondering, on all this, you've said we're looking into it and Israel is investigating, but in each of these cases, the U.S. doesn't seem to be as cautious with its money and support as it is with UNRWA.
So I'm going to give my second, but he's being very polite about it. This guy's being incredibly polite, probably because he wants to be invited back. But he says, you guys are being very cautious by defunding UNRWA just in case 12 guys were involved in October 7th. But you're not so cautious with funding Israel as they commit genocide. Can you speak to that difference there? You're fine with sending billions upon billions of dollars to Israel to commit genocide, but you are very quick to take away your millions of dollars from UNRWA, an aid agency that provides over 9 million hospital visits and medical visits a year for Palestinians. Interesting that difference, huh?
It's to the point that the ICJ and the U.S. court both say Israel may be plausibly committing genocide. Still, U.S. money is coming while the U.S. shut off UNRWA funding immediately. So I'm just wondering if you could explain that sort of difference.
Let me say there is, I think, a false equivalency embedded in that question between members of a terrorist organization who went out and intentionally killed.
So You can tell what he's going to say, right? The false equivalency between terrorists and Israel. Now, first of all, there's actually not, because there's a false equivalency in the other way. Israel's a massively bigger terrorist than anybody who shot some people. Massively bigger. Israel has killed over 28,000 people in 4 months, in a little over 4 months, whereas he's talking about these 12 UNRWA employees who may have been involved in October 7th. There's been no evidence that they killed anyone or even that these people were actually involved. And so he's acting like, oh, you're making a false equivalency. It's like, no, he's actually really not.
Innocent civilians.
Right.
That is the difference. When you have
and innocent civilians. Well, no, when you defund UNRWA, what are you doing? You're harming innocent civilians. So it's
members of Hamas who participated in October 7th, according to the allegations made by the government of Israel, that I should say UNRWA itself found credible.
That's actually not true. UNRWA, I brought you the article the other day from The Guardian of the chief of UNRWA saying that they had fired the people that Israel claimed were involved in October 7th with no evidence. So they didn't find it credible. They just fired them because it looked better to fire them. So there actually is not credible evidence. He's making that up. But he's also completely dodging the question, which is, wow, you're quick to defund an aid agency over ridiculous charges by Israel, but you're very not quick to defund Israel as Israel commits genocide endlessly. You notice the difference. Okay. Couple more stories about, and some of this is about the pushback, the fight to make people aware of this genocide. And it is, I like to highlight those who are standing back, even if it's not as funny as watching the State Department spokespeople squirm and shit like that. I love to highlight these activists because they do not get highlighted in your mainstream media for obvious reasons. Palestine Action target 2 companies at once complicit in Israel's genocide. Palestine Action, great group. They do a lot of wonderful activism. You should follow them on their social media accounts. The group drenched the Manchester offices of the Bank of New York Mellon, in red paint to symbolize the bank's complicity in Palestinian bloodshed. Activists also simultaneously sprayed a message calling for Elbit to be shut down. Elbit Systems, that is. Bank of New York Mellon invest over 10 million pounds in Elbit Systems, Israel's largest weapons firm. Elbit Systems, which provides 85% of Israel's military drone fleet and land-based equipment, as well as missiles, bullets, and other weaponry. Also, while that was going on, activists from Palestine Action blockaded the Bristol headquarters of Elbit Systems. By attaching themselves to each other using lock-ons, they prevented access into the central hub of what Palestine Action described as Elbit's lethal business. The action continued for hours, stopping all deliveries coming in and going out of Elbit's factory. So I just wanted to highlight Palestine Action, excellent group that has been fighting to call people's attention to this genocide, but even before that, to the treatment of Palestinians, which is so horrific in so many regards. Chris Hedges, my buddy Chris, I don't know. I don't know. I can call him my buddy, my friend. He's my acquaintance. My acquaintance, Chris. Chris Hedges wrote in a Sheer post about those who are speaking out and the silence of those who are not. And I wanted to read this kind of key part of it, which is really important about those who are not speaking out, especially those in some positions of power or positions of academia, etc. He says, Robert J. Lifton, in his book, The Nazi Doctors, Medical Killing and the Psychology of Genocide, writes that genocidal projects require the active participation of educated professionals, physicians, scientists, engineers, military leaders, lawyers, clergy, university professors, and other teachers who combine to create not only the technology of genocide, but much of its ideological rationale, moral climate and organizational process. And this is so important. People don't really talk that much about this, about the silence right now of so many high-level academics, so many doctors and lawyers, those who are really, the upper management of society, even if they're not in the ruling elite. Like, you don't expect our members of Congress to really be speaking out because we understand what they are. They are mostly sociopaths funded entirely by corporate America, which is allied entirely with corporate Israel and the Israeli government. So you don't expect them to speak out. Whereas you would think after 4 months of just sheer in-your-face, full frontal, gory, detailed genocide, you would start to expect academics, the academics across the nation, and the doctors and the lawyers and those people in the upper management of society. Chris Hedges continues, a group of 100 Israeli doctors in November 2023 defended the bombing of hospitals in Gaza, claiming they were used as Hamas command centers, a charge Israel has been unable to verify. So these are doctors defending bombing hospitals. What Chris doesn't mention, which I again mention a lot, is that even if there were a Hamas command center, quote unquote, even if it looked like the goddamn Borg underneath these hospitals, even if it looked like the deck of the Starship Enterprise, even if you still can't bomb an entire hospital and kill so many innocent people because you say there's a command center underneath. But on top of that, Israel's failed to provide any proof of that. To continue from the article, the deans of U.S. medical schools and leading medical organizations, especially the American Medical Association, AMA, have joined the ranks of universities, law schools, churches, and the media to turn their backs on Palestinians. The AMA shut down a debate on a ceasefire resolution among its members and has called for medical neutrality, although it abandoned medical neutrality to denounce Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So they're not calling for medical neutrality on Ukraine, on the U.S. proxy war in Ukraine, but they're calling for medical neutrality when it comes to straight up, very clear, by the book genocide. Once again, I know I mentioned it a lot. If you look up the definition of genocide, you can even look it up on the Holocaust Memorial Fund's website. You will tick off every single part of the definition of genocide. Hedges says there is a cost to denouncing this genocide, a cost they do not intend to pay. They fear being attacked. They fear destroying their careers. They fear losing funding. They fear a loss of status. They fear persecution. They fear social isolation. This fear makes them complicit, he says. And I add, it also makes them goddamn cowards. All right. It's just sheer cowardice. I have tanked most of my comedy career in order to speak out about things like this. And these people who won't, even many of them who have far more secure careers and things like tenure at universities, they just won't do it. And it's true. They will be attacked. The universities may come after them. The medical associations may come after them. But there becomes a point when you're witnessing genocide on your televisions and your computers, there comes a point where you just go, bag it, got to do it. Got to do it. One more paragraph. Hedges says, and what of those who do speak out? They are branded as anti-Semites and supporters of terrorism. George Washington University clinical psychology professor Laura Sheehy was pushed out of her job. The former head of Human Rights Watch, Kenneth Roth, was denied a fellowship at Harvard's Carr Center for Human Rights Policy because of his alleged anti-Israel bias, unquote. San Francisco professor Rabab al-Buhadi was sued for supporting Palestinian rights. I'm going to pronounce this one wrong. Shad Abu Salama was suspended from Sheffield Hallam University in the UK after a vicious smear campaign, although the institution later settled her discrimination claim against it. Professor Jasper Puar at at Rutgers University is an ongoing target for the Israel lobby and endures constant harassment. Medical students and faculty in Canada face suspension or expulsion if they publicly criticize Israel. And if you want to throw one more on there, Chris's friend and my, I'll call him a friend, Cornel West, was he did not receive tenure at Harvard University because despite being hugely popular, hugely well known, hugely successful in academia, he did not receive tenure, and almost definitely, or I think it's pretty clear, because he was speaking up for Palestinian rights and saying Palestine should be free. So yeah, it is just sheer cowardice from these academics, from these doctors, from these lawyers, from the people at the tops of our society in certain aspects, certain regards. I realize you don't call every lawyer the top of your society, but you know what I'm saying. And yeah, many of them are cowards, and many of them just will not speak out about it. Will not speak out about so much important news that is being, ignored around the world. Now, of course, much of the world has stood up against this genocide, and those who are doing it are amazing, as I just highlighted some activists a few minutes ago. Okay, in a few minutes, I'm going to go to just rumble.com/Lee Camp. That's rumble.com/Lee Camp. But I want to address, most of this we're going to have to do at Rumble, but it's free to watch over there, as well as you can also look up my locals page, which is how I support this show. Hold on, trying to find. Okay, wanted to find this article, but as many of you know, jailed Russian opposition figure Alexei Navalny was just, well, I guess they're announcing died in prison. They're not saying killed yet, but died in prison today or yesterday. And I'm going to be addressing that story in just a minute at rumble.com/Lee Camp. Again, free to watch over there. So hope you will. I didn't even mean to close that right there, but hope you will join me over there too, because there's an aspect to this that very few people are talking about. So rumble.com/Lee Camp. See you there in just a minute. Let me just fix this up.